Have you ever looked at your bank account and felt genuinely confused? Like, you earn decent money, maybe even good money, but somehow you're always running close to empty. You're not alone in that feeling. And here's what's interesting. This isn't really a math problem. It's a psychology problem. Today, we're going deep on 18 lessons about cash flow that nobody talks about in the way they actually need to be talked about. Not spreadsheets, not budgeting templates. The real mental stuff that determines whether money flows toward you or away from you. Stick with me because some of these are going to challenge things you thought you knew about yourself and money. Lesson 1. Your relationship with money started before you could read. Before you ever earned a single dollar, your brain was already being programmed. You watched how your parents talked about bills, how they reacted when something expensive broke, whether money was discussed openly or treated like a shameful secret. That programming runs so deep that most financial decisions you make today are emotional echoes of things you witnessed as a kid. Understanding this doesn't mean you're stuck. It means you can finally identify the actual source of the pattern instead of blaming your income. Lesson 2. Cash flow anxiety is a real neurological event. When money is tight, your brain's threat detection system fires up the same way it would if a predator was chasing you. Cortisol spikes, decision-making quality drops. You start making short-term choices that feel urgent but hurt you long-term. Payday loans, impulse buying as emotional relief, avoiding opening bills. This isn't weakness, this is biology. The problem is that operating in a constant state of financial stress literally makes you worse at managing money. The solution starts with understanding that you need to lower the threat response before you can make better decisions. Lesson 3. Income is not cash flow. This one trips up a lot of people. You can have a high salary and terrible cash flow. A doctor pulling in $300,000 a year but spending $320,000 has worse cash flow than a teacher making $60,000 and spending $50,000. Cash flow is the relationship between what comes in and what goes out. More importantly, it's about timing and control. Money that arrives at irregular intervals and leaves at unpredictable moments creates psychological chaos, even when the totals look fine on paper. Lesson 4. The invisible money leak is always lifestyle inflation. You got a raise. Wonderful. But somehow 3 months later you don't feel any richer. That's because almost universally when income goes up, spending follows it within weeks. New car, nicer apartment, better restaurants. These upgrades feel like rewards for your hard work, and psychologically they are. But they quietly reset your baseline spending so that every future raise just resets to zero again. The most financially powerful thing you can do after an income increase is to sit with the same lifestyle for 6 months and let the gap between income and spending widen. Want the exact system I use to organize my money? Check out the Money Clarity Google Sheet dashboard linked below this video. Lesson 5. Scarcity thinking is self-reinforcing. When people feel financially scarce, they tend to narrow their thinking to immediate problems. This is called tunneling in behavioral economics. You focus so hard on the immediate shortage that you miss deals, opportunities, and connections that could help you. Studies have found that people experiencing financial scarcity actually perform worse on cognitive tests than when they're in a comfortable financial state. The scarcity itself consumes mental bandwidth. This is why building even a small financial cushion changes not just your stress levels, but your actual cognitive capacity to improve your situation. Lesson 6. Your spending tells the truth about your values even when you lie to yourself. Most people say their priorities are family, health, freedom, and security. But when you actually look at where their money goes, it often tells a completely different story. Subscriptions for things barely used. Eating out because cooking feels like effort. Status purchases that signal a self-image to strangers who will forget about it in 30 seconds. Your cash flow statement is an honest diary of your real priorities, not the ones you claim on social media. The uncomfortable exercise is to look at last month's spending and ask, if an outsider read this, what would they say I actually value? Lesson 7. Delayed gratification is a skill, not a personality trait. Somewhere along the way, some people got the idea that the ability to save money is just something certain disciplined people are born with. That is absolutely false. Delayed gratification is a muscle that can be trained like any other. It gets stronger with small, consistent practice. The famous marshmallow studies actually showed something more interesting than people think. Kids who could wait weren't just naturally disciplined. They also trusted that the reward would actually come. Building trust in your own financial future through small promises kept to yourself is what actually develops this skill over time. Lesson 8. The psychology of sunk costs destroys more wealth than bad investments. A sunk cost is money you've already spent that you can't get back. The psychological problem is that humans are wired to factor these past losses into current decisions in irrational ways. You hold on to a terrible investment because you already put so much into it. You stay subscribed to a service you hate because you paid for the year up front. You keep a business idea alive past its usefulness because you sacrificed so much for it. Every one of these decisions is made worse by backward-looking thinking. The only question that matters is, given where things are right now, what's the best move going forward? Lesson 9. Small amounts matter more than you think in both directions. People dramatically underestimate the long-term impact of small daily habits. The famous coffee example gets mocked a lot, but the principle behind it is real. It's not about the coffee. It's about the dozens of small recurring decisions that add up silently over years. $5 here, $12 monthly there, an unused subscription, a habit of convenience spending. In the other direction, small consistent savings invested over decades become genuinely life-changing. The math of compounding is emotionally difficult to grasp because our brains are not wired to think exponentially. But the people who truly internalize this change their daily financial habits completely. Lesson 10. Your social environment sets your spending thermostat. Humans are deeply social creatures, and one of the most powerful drivers of spending is comparison. Not necessarily keeping up with the Joneses in the old-fashioned sense. It's more subtle than that. It's the baseline of normal that your social circle unconsciously defines. If everyone around you takes expensive vacations, drives newer cars, and eats at high-end places, that becomes your perception of normal, and you'll spend accordingly to stay within that social comfort zone. Changing your cash flow sometimes requires honestly examining whether your social environment is financially compatible with the life you actually want to build. Lesson 11. Financial avoidance is one of the most expensive habits in existence. A huge number of people simply avoid looking at their money situation. They don't open bank apps. They don't check statements. They feel vaguely anxious but tell themselves it'll sort itself out. This avoidance feels protective in the short term. Looking at a stressful number doesn't change it, but it does make you feel worse. So the brain learns to avoid looking. The problem is that financial neglect compounds just as reliably as financial attention does. Fees go unnoticed, subscriptions accumulate, bills get missed, debt grows. The act of regularly and calmly looking at your financial picture, even when it's uncomfortable, is one of the highest return habits you can develop. Lesson 12. Windfalls are almost always mismanaged because of mental accounting. When people get unexpected money, a tax refund, an inheritance, a bonus, they mentally categorize it differently than their regular income. Regular income feels serious and purposeful. A windfall feels like found money, like it doesn't really count, like it's fair game for spending freely. Psychologists call this mental accounting. The windfall gets spent on things you'd never buy with regular money and disappears in weeks. Meanwhile, the same amount, if treated as serious money and deployed into debt payoff or investment, could meaningfully shift your financial trajectory. A dollar is a dollar regardless of where it came from. Lesson 13. Debt is not just a financial burden, it is a psychological one. There's research suggesting that carrying debt affects your mood, your focus, your sleep, and your relationships in ways that go far beyond the actual interest payments. The constant background hum of knowing you owe more than you own creates low-grade psychological stress that's always running. What's interesting is that people often pay down debt in mathematically suboptimal ways, but psychologically effective ones. Paying off the smallest balance first, even if a larger one has higher interest, gives a psychological win that motivates continued behavior. Understanding that debt management is as much about managing psychology as managing interest rates changes how you approach it. Lesson 14. Your identity around money determines your ceiling. This is a profound one. Most people have an unconscious financial identity, a number or a lifestyle level that just feels like them. It might be, I'm the kind of person who lives paycheck to paycheck, or I'm someone who never has quite enough. When income rises above that unconscious ceiling, self-sabotage often follows. Not deliberately, not consciously, but somehow the car breaks down at the right moment, or an impulsive decision drains the surplus. Changing your financial outcomes in a lasting way requires first examining and deliberately reshaping the story you tell yourself about the kind of person you are with money. Lesson 15. The best cash flow system is the one you'll actually maintain. A lot of personal finance advice ignores human psychology and creates systems that are technically perfect and practically useless. Elaborate spreadsheets that get abandoned in week 2. Categorization systems so detailed they become a part-time job. Restriction budgets so tight they trigger rebellion spending. The goal of any cash flow system is not elegance, it's consistency. Even a slightly imperfect system maintained for years beats a perfect system used for 2 weeks. Automation is often the answer. When you take the decision out of the equation and make saving automatic, you remove the daily psychological friction that makes people give up. Lesson 16. Generosity and abundance thinking actually improve cash flow behavior. This one sounds counterintuitive and maybe even like wishful thinking, but there's behavioral evidence behind it. People who give some portion of their income away, even small amounts, tend to feel more in control of their money rather than controlled by it. Generosity creates a psychological sense of abundance rather than scarcity. And that shift from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking changes dozens of downstream financial decisions. It also builds social capital and community relationships that often have indirect financial benefits over time. This isn't magical thinking. It's about what mindset you operate from and how that mindset affects every money decision you make. Lesson 17. Convenience is one of the most underappreciated drivers of financial waste. Modern consumer culture has been engineered specifically to make spending easier and saving harder. One-click purchasing. Tap to pay. Pre-saved card details. The entire architecture of modern commerce reduces the friction between impulse and transaction to almost nothing. Meanwhile, investing or saving typically requires more steps, more apps, more decisions. This asymmetry is not accidental. Paying attention to where convenience is working against you and deliberately adding a little friction back into your spending decisions can have a surprisingly significant effect on your cash flow. A moment of pause between wanting something and buying it changes the outcome more often than you'd expect. Lesson 18. The ultimate cash flow lesson is about freedom, not numbers. Here's the thing that ties all of this together. Most financial advice treats money as the goal. Save this much, invest in this, hit this net worth target. But money itself is not actually what anyone wants. What people want is what money enables: time, options, security, the ability to say no to things that drain them and yes to things that matter. When you start managing cash flow through that lens, every decision becomes clearer. You're not trying to hit a number. You're trying to build a life where you have genuine choices. That reframing alone changes how people think about every dollar that comes in and goes out. Now let's pull back and look at the bigger picture of what all 18 lessons are actually telling us. There's a thread running through every single one of them, and it's this. Your financial life is not primarily determined by how much you earn. It's determined by the invisible architecture of your thoughts, beliefs, habits, and emotional responses around money. Two people can have identical incomes and completely different financial realities based on nothing but psychology. This is simultaneously the most humbling and the most empowering thing you can understand about cash flow. Humbling because you can't blame the economy or your salary or your circumstances and leave it at that. Empowering because it means the lever is inside you. It's accessible. You don't need a raise to start changing your relationship with money. You need awareness, which you're actively building right now by engaging with this kind of content. Let me walk you through something practical for a moment. If you were to take just 3 of these 18 lessons and apply them this week, which 3 would create the most immediate impact? I'd argue it's lessons 6, 11, and 15. Lesson 6 because looking honestly at where your money actually goes versus where you think it goes creates immediate clarity. Lesson 11 because ending financial avoidance and simply looking at your situation regularly removes the mystery and reduces anxiety over time. And Lesson 15, because automating at least one saving or investing action this week removes the psychological battle from the equation entirely. None of those require a perfect financial situation to implement. All of them are available to you right now, regardless of what your bank balance looks like today. Here's something I want you to sit with. Most people treat their finances reactively. Money comes in and they respond to whatever demands present themselves until it's gone. The shift to proactive cash flow management is not about willpower. It's about design. Designing your environment, your systems, your automatic behaviors so that good financial outcomes happen by default rather than requiring heroic daily discipline. The people who seem effortlessly good with money usually aren't exerting more willpower than everyone else. They've built systems, environments, and habits that make good financial behavior the path of least resistance. They've addressed the psychological patterns that would otherwise sabotage them. And they've aligned their spending with what they genuinely value rather than what they've been conditioned to want. Let's talk about the long game for a second because this matters enormously. The compounding effects of good cash flow habits are not exciting in the short term. They're genuinely boring. Saving automatically every month doesn't feel like much. Investing consistently through market ups and downs feels anticlimactic. Declining lifestyle inflation when you get a raise feels like deprivation. But zoom out 10 years, 20 years, and the difference between the person who did these things and the person who didn't is not incremental. It's transformational. The boring, unglamorous, consistent management of cash flow through a psychologically healthy lens is one of the most powerful wealth-building forces that exists. One more thing before we close. Financial anxiety is incredibly common, and if you're experiencing it, I want to normalize that without letting it become an excuse for inaction. Almost everyone who has significantly improved their financial situation started from a place of stress, confusion, or shame around money. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that you're bad with money or that change isn't possible. It's actually a sign that you care enough to pay attention. That caring, that awareness, that willingness to look honestly at the situation is the starting point for everything. The 18 lessons we covered today aren't a checklist you work through once and complete. They're recurring themes that will show up throughout your financial life in different forms at different stages. Sometimes you'll nail lesson 4 and lifestyle inflation won't touch you. Other times it'll creep back in and you'll need to revisit it. Sometimes lesson 8 will bite you and you'll catch yourself holding on to something past its usefulness. That's not failure. That's being human. The goal is gradual improvement in awareness and behavior over time, not perfection. What I'd encourage you to do right now, literally right now, while this is fresh, is to write down the one lesson from these 18 that resonated most with you. not the most interesting one intellectually. The one that made you slightly uncomfortable because it was accurate about your current situation. That discomfort is a signal. It's pointing directly at the area where the most meaningful change is available to you. Cash flow is ultimately a reflection of who you are with money. And who you are with money is something you can consciously, deliberately evolve. The psychology is workable. The habits are buildable. The patterns can be interrupted and redirected. You just have to be willing to look clearly at what's actually going on under the surface. If this video gave you something useful today, I highly recommend watching the video on the screen. Share this video with someone in your life who would benefit from hearing it, not in a condescending way. Just because money and psychology is genuinely one of those topics that changes how people see their lives when they encounter it at the right moment. And that's exactly the kind of thing worth passing forward. Subscribe if you want more content that goes beyond the surface-level financial advice and actually digs into why we do what we do with money. There's a lot more to explore here, and we're just getting started.